I'm Tanya,
And I'm Michelle.
and here we are back at our podcast with podcast number 2. So, what we're going to talk about today is just basically adding on to a little bit about our lifestyle, in this specific case, our location. For those of you who don't know, I live in New York, born and raised, and Michelle, go ahead, add about yours.
I live in Miami, Florida, and I was also born and raised in New York City. And been living in South Florida for 10 years now. So I think that Tanya and I decided to talk about where we're from and the cities and the differences. Because Tanya, you're also pretty familiar with Miami, right?
Yeah, we go down a lot, mainly because we have a couple of places there, my husband's side, and of course I visit Michelle a lot. And I can say definitely a lot of differences, but some similarities. So we just wanted to tap into that a little bit, talk about the lifestyle. And obviously, Michelle has a whole different story. She moved from New York to Miami, and I can't believe it's been 10 years, by the way.
Yeah,
So
10 years.
maybe you want to just add a little bit, like, how is the shift? Does it feel like, is Miami anything like New York in the sense of the fast paced life? Because I completely don't think so. Like, for me, when I'm there, I'm like, it's just too slow. And that's why it's like vacation mode for me.
Right. I think it's vacation mode for a lot of people. I think Miami really heavily relies on their tourism,
Right.
and everyone comes to Miami from all over the United States to do, like, bachelorette parties, bachelor parties, birthday weekends, girls trips, guys trips. It's really popular. Um, but to answer your question, no, they're so different. To me, they are polar opposites. Thinking back at when I first moved here, I was in like full culture shock, full. And it's kind of hard for other people across the United States to understand that and relate to that because in reality, Miami is still considered a city.
Right.
Like New York is considered a city. You have tall buildings. It's not really suburban, especially Miami. There's other suburban areas in Florida, the state of Florida, but in South Florida in particular, it's more known to be more of a city. So,
That's where the parties are at. Miami.
exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Lives there. To me, I still tell you, it's like you're on vacation every day. You're like, no, I live here. And I'm like, but you have a pool outside, you know?
Right, right. So let me ask you something. When you think of New York, what's the first word that comes to your mind?
Busy.
Busy. Okay. I mean, I think when I think of New York, the first thing that comes to my mind is excitement,
Really?
adrenaline. Yeah. I also thought busy, but of course, I wouldn't, because busy can go either way. It could be positive, it could be negative. So for me, I see New York as exciting because even on your most boring day, there's something going on. New York is a city that, of course, never sleeps, and it stays true to that phrase. So
Yeah, I guess.
I think that, like, it also depends on how you view it. Like, you say it's super busy, I say it's super exciting. And I also think that there's like this misconception all the time of people where, like, when they live in a state, they hate the state, and they're just like, we want
It's
to
like
get out of there, we want to get out of here.
we associate our everyday lives for the place that we live in. Like, I'm I live here, born and raised here. And every time I do go to Florida, I could never imagine living there. To me, like, my husband has said it to me before, and he's like, "Would you ever move there?" And I'm like, I don't think I can ever move there. Like, it's just too slow for me. It's like waking up to vacation. The weather's always nice, which is like, why am I negating a happy thing? Because I feel
Right.
good with that
Exactly.
kind of like environment, the weather. I feel better, but it doesn't seem real. For me, it's like that can't be real life. If that makes sense.
I mean, it totally makes sense. But I think that because you only come here for vacation, that's why you classify it that way. I live here, and there are days where you wake up and it's super dark out and cloudy out because we have hurricane season and it's like raining and storming and all this other stuff. So yeah, it's not always vacation. And also you don't really have time to vacation when you're working or when you're living a
Right.
daily life, when you're going to the grocery store on a daily basis, you're going to do your laundry, you're going to do, just doing the regular daily things, you're taking care of your car, you're getting your oil change, you're filling up your tank, you're just doing your
The
regular
day to day,
day-to-day life. You're not on vacation. Although this is where I think quality of life comes into play.
which is why people move down there. I'm just thinking, like, whenever we're there, like you were mentioning the day to day things, I don't have to really do the day to day things. Obviously, yeah, we have to go get food. And whenever we went grocery shopping, whenever we were staying at my mother in law's, I'm like, I can't imagine driving minimum 15 minutes somewhere, getting what I need to get. And then if I forget something, I have to go back there. Like, it doesn't seem normal when I can do that and go downstairs and across the street.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. Well, I was born and raised in New York, right? You and I both actually lived in Borough Park, Brooklyn, for the beginning years of our lives. And then me and you both actually grew up in Queens as well. So we, in terms of New York, there are different boroughs, there are different types of environments in New York City. And I'm talking, when I say New York City, I mean the five boroughs. I don't mean Westchester, I don't mean upstate. So with that being said, New York is just a different pace. It's a different environment.
absolutely.
Here, like you were mentioning, you have to drive everywhere. In New York City, you don't, there are people who live in New York City their whole lives and never learned how to drive, never sat behind
Or
the wheel,
don't drive.
or don't drive because they don't need it. That's not a necessity.
Or they're afraid. But seriously speaking, fine. For those who don't know, well, probably whoever doesn't know, I have a major fear of driving. And if I were to live in Florida, you best believe you'd see me walking everywhere like a lunatic because transportation's different there. I've tried. There's also no subways there. What the hell is that about? When I first went there, it was the weirdest thing. Like the bus stops were very clean. And then like I went on the bus before and then my husband's like, what the hell are you doing? Like we rented a car. I'm like, but what if I lived here? How would I accustom? Because I don't drive a car.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of foreign. You need a car there.
It's a very different lifestyle. There's not even like taxis that you can hail. It's not the same. When I first moved here, Uber didn't even exist. And that makes me feel really old, but we didn't have
Wild.
Uber. We didn't have Uber, Lyft, all those things that to make it super easily accessible. We didn't have, like obviously there were black cab services where you call a car company and they come and they pick you up. But I never did that because it was not never a necessity for me. And it was also not easily as accessible as it is in New York. In New York, you hail a cab, you raise your hand, and then the cab is there, and then it takes care of you, and that's it. But it's also out of necessity. So, with that being said, like there are certain things that really affect the lifestyle between living in New York and living in South Florida. I say South Florida because a lot of people use Miami interchangeably with Broward County, which is like where the Hard Rock is and stuff like that. And it's not the same. So, South Florida is why I say South Florida because it is the south part of Florida. And yeah, it's just really different. And, even the people are different. So in New York, it's a massive melting pot. You're going to see all different types of people, of races, religions, ethnicities, just different. Super, 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 super different. South Florida is heavily populated with Latin Americans, South Americans, heavily populated. And English is not the first language here. It's not. Spanish is. So
That's
you don't
interesting.
really, it's such a big difference. When you think about New York, of course Spanish is going to help, but if you don't speak English you can't get a job in New York. You just can't. But if you don't speak English in South Florida, that's fine. As long as you speak Spanish, you got a job. And I've never seen anything like that before in my life, but that's how it is in South Florida. So it is really different. And the culture shock comes in waves. Oh,
I'm literally thinking about the few times that I was there and you were saying how the people are different. And not to say, listen, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm allowed to say you're a true New Yorker. We're allowed to say New Yorkers are rude. Like they're rude. So I don't know if you agree. She's like, I don't agree.
not anymore. Not anymore. I don't think New
I
Yorkers
think
are rude. I think New Yorkers are real. And they
real
don't have
and
time for the bullshit.
But
you
that,
know?
I guess it comes off as rude because
Yeah, for
I've
sure.
known that I had my own moments where I would ignore somebody because I don't want to, like, I don't want to deal with the unnecessary encounter. Or even like, the same thing when others pass by, like we almost unintentionally, intentionally come off as an asshole. We don't even mean to, but that's just almost the dynamic. When I go down to Florida, everybody greets you.
Yeah.
Everybody greets you. They don't need to know you. They not only say how are you, they would greet you whether it's good morning or good afternoon or whatever. How are you doing? And I'm just like, what? And it's not the usual person who's at the building. It's like a random person at the store. And in the beginning, it was weird. It was nice, but it was weird because it's not something we're used to.
Right. So I realized that in New York, you are raised to be a very strong person. You have to be able to defend yourself, take care of yourself, because when you're walking on the streets of New York, you don't know who you're going to bump into. You don't know who's going to cross your path. And you have to be aware. You have to be, looking at your surroundings, making sure that you're safe. New York is obviously known to be a city with a high crime rate. And I remember just like I didn't want to say hi to people and I didn't want to be around people because I was afraid. I was afraid, to be, of course, Miami, in my opinion, is way safer, way safer. More so because there's not that many people congested on the streets. You're always either in your car, in a building, a house or something. There's always a place that you're going to. And if you're outside, you're at a park or you're at a beach in a public location where there's a lot of other people. And safety is a major issue. Safety is a big difference, right? So I think that coming to New York, obviously in the train station, what do we do when we used to take the train? We don't make eye contact with people. We don't make eye contact with people because we don't know how they're going to react to us. They can lash out irrationally. They can go crazy.
Right.
They can attack you, But in Miami, you make eye contact, you smile because what are the chances that the person next to you on the line at Publix is going to lash out at you? You know what I'm saying? Or at the grocery store, at the DMV, or whatever. It's not that high of a chance as it is when you're doing stuff like walking down the streets of New York. You know what I'm saying? So I think it does have to do with the fact that we have to protect ourselves. And this kind of sounds like I'm defending New Yorkers, but I am because honestly, when I first moved here, it was a culture shock. And I was like, okay, and I'm now that person. Now I go into elevators in New York. And when I'm in New York, I'm a New Yorker. I won't necessarily always greet somebody in the elevator in New York, but in Miami, I do, and you become your surroundings. You understand
Right.
where you feel comfortable to do that and where you don't. I'm not going to say hello to a random that I don't know in New York because it's a little bit more of a danger factor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't really think about it too much because I'm in that pool. Like that's just
Mhm.
my
Natural.
surroundings all the time. It's natural.
It's
So
natural.
yeah, especially the fear that's instilled with the crime rates, with the public transportation is a whole different ball game.
Hmm.
And also being a woman in public transportation, you have to be vigilant. You have to kind of look over your shoulder. You don't feel comfortable or safe. And it's like, how? I lived here my whole life and I still feel like someone's looking over me, you know?
In New York, you're raised to be super strong, vigilant, aware of your surroundings, and just go, 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 fast, fast, fast pace. Yes, for safety, but also for efficiency. If you're walking slowly in New York and someone behind you is trying to get somewhere because everything is busy, you're in their way, and then a fight can break out. So it's always something like that. And then when you think of how different things can be, when I moved down here, of course, I learned how to drive in New York, but I first really started driving in South Florida. And when I moved here, I was like, okay, I need to drive. And you learn sense of direction differently. In New York, you're so used to, okay, you walk 2 blocks that way, 2 blocks that way, up 3 blocks, down 7th Street, make a right on North, whatever, Parkway, blah, 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 blah. And that's your routing, and then you move to an area where you have to drive and you realize, oh yeah, I can't go this way because there's a one way. And when there's a one way, it's not the same when you're walking. There's no one way to walk. And there's a lot of different things that go into moving from state to state and living in a different state. And it's not only Miami and New York. New York is a very massive city, so it's not just like a regular city.
What I was trying to tell you earlier, but it just came back to me.
Hmm.
Can we just touch on my favorite topic in the world, the Grubhub, Uber Eats takeout situation.
I can't.
Because what the hell? Let me just say the story.
Okay.
Every time we go there, we obviously go and dine in. For us to do takeout, like, there's no reason we're there, whatever. But when Michelle out here, when she does takeout, she goes, I gotta order 3 hours in advance. I said, what? And she's like, yeah, by the time I place the order, by the time they get my order, by the time they come and my food will be cold, it'll take about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Food comes in 15 minutes here in New York. And you're like,
I mean, it's something that I'm so used to at this point, so I never do takeout anymore. But again, it's just a different culture. Like you, first of all, the places, the food, let alone, not even
very
going too
different.
far, the food itself is not as good as New York. Like New York is top notch quality food, and even the hole in the walls, like the Chinese food down the street, the sushi down the street, it's fresh, it's clean. You don't feel like you're gonna die eating it. It's good. It's good quality. It's good taste. It's very very different. In Miami, it's very commercialized. Everything is larger. Corporations and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Things that you're gonna get, Grubhub, Uber Eats. When I first moved here, none of that existed. There was no Uber Eats. There was no like Grubhub. It was only certain places that delivered and certain places that didn't. And the amount of places that delivered were so minimal because distances are larger. So things take longer. You know, 5 miles here in Miami is not the same as 5 miles in New York. It,
Absolutely not. You'll find
absolutely.
at least, I want to ballpark a number, like 50 places within 5 miles. Maybe if I did live somewhere where it's not so accessible or convenient, would I do takeout 1 to 2 times a week? I wouldn't. I'd get annoyed.
Exactly.
But to have this accessibility at the tip of our fingers, New Yorkers become so impatient. It has to be here now because that's what we're used to.
It's
It's crazy.
competition too. New York has the competition. New York has the drive. It's like, okay, the my neighbors down there, 2 blocks down, they get the food to that person within 30 seconds. I need to get it within 15 seconds. So it's always competition that drives them to do better. There's not that much competition in South Florida in terms of certain aspects. Of course, there are other things that are larger in competition and smaller in others. For example, like I would assume that plastic surgeons here have way more competition than they do in New York. But again, you don't really know. There's just always a certain type of place where you're going to have more or less. And that has a lot to do with, again, politics, people, the clientele you're serving,
Yeah,
the culture too. It's a lot about the culture. It's probably all culture because New Yorkers are used to convenience and they're used to being fast and they're used to being efficient and convenient, like, just accuracy and stuff like that. South Florida, a lot of people, again, like I said in the beginning of this podcast, that they are used to tourism. They rely heavily on tourism. And when you're a tourist, you're relaxing, you're on vacation, you're not in a
exactly.
rush. So a lot of the time, the people just are relaxed, the people who live here too. If it was up to me,
Right.
I wish I could spend 10 years of my life living in different places every 10 years or even every 5. I've been here for 10 years now and I'm like, okay, I'm willing to move somewhere else now for another 10 years. I'm willing.
That's so interesting because, and maybe it's because of my personality and my environment, I don't think I can make such a drastic change because people get comfortable and change is hard.
Um,
So to move from state to state is very difficult, especially when you're somewhere, like you said, the city that never sleeps, somewhere where things don't close early, where you have the convenience, where everything's across the street. How could you leave something like that, you know? I
mhm. Well, to get a little deeper, when I moved, I was going through it. Like, it was not easy for me. I was
I'm sure
17 years old, young, fresh out of high school. In high school, I had so many friends. I was super active
you were
in
a
high
kid.
school.
You were a kid.
I was a kid, but I was a kid with like a massive social life, a huge family, and I come to South Florida and crickets.
Right.
Crickets. Not only crickets because I had no friends or family around, but crickets because literal crickets. It was
Right. And how
quiet.
much do I tell you, I love those damn crickets. I sleep so well.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, I couldn't sleep. For
I
months.
remember.
For months, I couldn't sleep. I was like, Tanya, it's too quiet. It's too quiet. I can't sleep. I had to turn on the TV and put it on the timer. It took me so long to get used to the quiet. So, and I'm walking down the streets, or if I'm in a place and people, I'm asking a question in English and they're all speaking to me in Spanish. It's as if I moved to Latin America.
Like,
I
where
didn't
the
speak
hell?
the language. I didn't understand the culture. I was super impatient. I was just struggling. So it's not an easy, I mean, I was really young. I think if I did that now, I'd be a lot more confident with it because I had the experience. I not only prevailed, I really, really elevated myself. So I flourished, I thrived through that process. So, of course, if I did it again, I think I would be great.
It'd be a different experience for you.
I couldn't find a job because I didn't speak Spanish. I had to learn Spanish. And now I have, of course, another language, but Spanish is a must. I have to speak Spanish. If I don't speak Spanish on a daily basis, I lose it. It's like, it's not easy, but it is definitely something that I do suggest for everyone to do because it changes your life. It changes your whole mentality, you know?
It taps into different versions of you, like you as a person. It taps into what you could be and how you do adapt and how you handle
Hmm.
change. And with that comes growth. And I say this because I'm really talking to my inner self because I'm so comfortable.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I can't imagine, like, really up and leaving. And in this case, not alone with me and my family, but it would be very interesting. But I would be so much more open to it now
Hmm.
because as an adult, and obviously if you have the funds and the means to do something like that, it would be interesting. Like we were saying, we want to be as adaptable as possible. We want to be able to see what life is for what it is. There's so much more out there. And when you kind of stay in your shell, it's like kind of boring. And I say this specifically to myself. So if anyone's like me, I can imagine the courage you would gain from doing something like that, if you can.
Speaking from experience, I really feel like your independence level grows through the roof. I will never forget when I first moved here and I realized that I need a car. I realized that I need to learn Spanish. I realized that I needed to go to college, but I needed to live in the state for at least 1 year to be considered a resident so that I wouldn't be charged 6 times the tuition.
Wow.
So it all hit me. I will never forget this day. I was standing there looking outside of my balcony and I was like, this is not going to be easy. Imagine like all these things in your head and you're 17. You're 17 years old, So thankfully I had like my parents are amazing. They supported me so much throughout all of it and they helped me and they guided me. And thankfully I started to make friends and I started to, learn the language and I use the internet and I listen to music. And there are certain things that you realize that you are able to really, really grow in your independence. And which is what I was actually going to say, because you mentioned comfort. People are comfortable. And at one point, when you realize when you're stepping out of your comfort zone, that's when you grow.
Right.
That's your
Exactly.
that's your main like, oh my God, I'm pushed to move to the next level. I don't have a choice. And you
Exactly.
just boom, you rock it.
Totally a good podcast topic, by the way. I'm listening to this and I'm like, I have so much to say about that. I never even realized how comfortable I am in my life and was throughout my life. I took certain sequences and certain steps and I kind of did it like in a certain way, in order. And I stayed in that lane and I never really budged out of anything,
Yeah.
which makes me a little too comfortable, which means I need to push myself to the limits in order to grow and find different versions of myself. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of think of it as like, sounds a little grotesque, wearing a different set of skin almost.
Yeah.
Because when you're comfortable, it's like you're being like in your most comfortable outfit. Same thing.
I don't know. I even like get emotional thinking about my move from and this was like supposed to be just like, okay, let's talk about New York, let's talk about Miami, but it became like a change topic, I feel. Like
Yeah.
what happens when you go through changes and um there's just so much more I can say about the changes that you encounter. Even the English lingo is different. I remember saying, I think one time the temperature had dropped. It was maybe like 65 degrees for the first time that I've witnessed it in South Florida. And I was like, damn, it's getting brick. And I remember saying that, and everyone's like, what? And I'm like, it's a little brick out, you know? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like chilly? Like a little chilly? And they're
You
like,
gave me the definition from New York.
and I'm telling you, that sparked up a huge conversation. A huge conversation. And I was like, do you know what this means? They're like, "Mm." And then they use this term. I remember when I first heard the term Getty. I was like, what's a Getty? You see, you don't even know. It's, oh, we're having a Getty. Are you gonna go to Jonathan's Getty? Are you gonna do it? And I'm like, what's a Getty? And it's a get together. I was
Never heard that before.
I was in shock. So imagine the link, like it's just so many changes that you have to adapt to, and it's so funny because I'm telling you, I still talk like a New Yorker. I still have New York lingo, you know, like there's just so many things. And, you know, I now started to incorporate Floridian lingo, you know, like we gotta also talk about the positives. There's a beach across the street. You know what I mean? And you can go to the beach all year round. On top of that, the
That
sun
doesn't even
shines.
seem realistic.
Yeah,
See that?
it's not even freezing outside 6 to 9 months out of the year. You know, we get like a couple of days of chill, of a nice little wind chill, a little cold front is what we call it down here. So there's just so many positive and negatives to anything you do in life outside of your comfort zone, but it's something that you can definitely, learn from. That's for sure.
Speaking of the weather, like I don't know, I just shifted into that. I never thought, obviously being born and raised here in New York, that there was such a thing where there's a consistent weather of some sort. It doesn't make sense. Four seasons make sense. So we have the outfits, we have where we store away the
Yeah,
winter clothes,
you do a
bring it out, the
rotation of
rotation
clothes.
of the clothes based on the season. But you always have to keep a little bit of everything out because you never know here. You
Mm-hmm.
never know. So for me, that's very normal.
Yeah, and I think I've told you this in the past. You don't realize time going. Time,
When it's consistent weather, you mean?
yeah. I don't
My point, yeah. That's exactly what you associate seasonal change as the months passing by.
with time.
So if I were to be in a place like Florida and it's always the same weather, I feel like I'd lose track of time.
That's what I think happened to me in the past 10 years. I'm like, how did 10 years go by? Because I promise you, at my first like Christmas time here, I was like talking to my mom and I was like, this is not December. There's no way, no how that this is December. And I remember distinctly like telling myself like, okay, yes, the year passed, okay, we're back in December, yes, it is winter time, and you have to convince yourself, honestly. and
I'm sure. I feel like I would do the same.
and like, you see these Christmas trees and these lights, and you see the Hanukkah stuff all over the like places, and you're just looking around and you're like, I'm in shorts and a tank top, does this make any sense? And then
I didn't even like put the two and two together. Like now that you're talking about it, because whenever we do go down there, it's usually around. I usually used to go a lot around January, so I kind of like I guess missed the seasonal time. So I didn't even think that that's what it would be like. So everything is what lit up and everyone's celebrating, but it's hot.
exactly. Literally, one of the beaches has a Christmas tree, and it's like a Christmas tree with a beach. And it's so funny. But what I wanted to say was that this is kind of why I started incorporating decorating my own apartment, my house, like where I live. Because
You're keeping it seasonal.
yes, I need to make it seasonal. I decorate every season. Tanya knows I'm a huge decorator. Right now, as we currently speak, my entire apartment is full of pumpkins, full of fall colors. We have like a burnt orange, we have dark reds, we have burgundies and browns, spooky themes and Thanksgiving stuff. Like I'm really,
With
really.
the cinnamon broom.
I just got a cinnamon broom. I love cinnamon brooms. I swear, you guys walk into the apartment and it smells super good. I proactively, I had to do that because I was like, okay, I want to feel the seasons. I want to feel like it's summertime, it's springtime. In springtime, I have like a whole cherry blossom theme in my house. Like I have cherry blossoms everywhere. I have like pink and white and pearly colors and things that just I want to feel the seasons. And I think that's also like a huge part of how I adjusted to living in South Florida
Yeah.
without seasons.
And just with time, because
Ah,
now that I'm thinking about it, the weather tells me where we are, like in the sense of time. I never have to think, like I know this sounds crazy, but let's say I don't, like I have no memory. My memory is wiped out. I got to look out the window and I can tell you around what month we're in. You
right.
know what I
Of
mean?
course. Of course.
And it's just so freaking interesting. Like you don't think about that when you're in one location,
Yeah.
especially like New York.
Yeah, a
Think
hundred
about it.
percent. And I miss it. Like I'm not gonna lie, I miss it so much. I miss the seasons. I miss my fall outfits. I miss my winter outfits. I miss on Thanksgiving wearing a sweater dress with stockings and boots. Like I miss
Definitely
that
versatile, definitely a fashion statement here all the time,
for sure.
which once again, when you don't think about it, I'm speaking for myself, it's just the norm. It's the norm to have my
Mhm.
knee-high boots in the back of the closet, whip them out in September. Like it's normal. It's
Right.
normal to have a little drawer chest for my summer bathing suits because I take them out in June. I appreciate that. It's like kind of a change in your sense of self, your identity almost, because of what you wear. And
Exactly.
if the weather is always the same, your outfits are kind of, give or take the same. So I really, now that I'm talking to you about it, I appreciate the weather changes. I do.
Yeah, and I actually I don't know if you remember, I was at this store and I saw this jacket. Oh, it was such
I
a
think
nice winter jacket, and
I literally gave you shit about it. I'm like, why does she
I
need a jacket?
fell in love with the jacket, and I was like, I want this jacket, I want this jacket, I want this jacket, and it was overpriced, and I was like, I want to buy the jacket, and Tany's like, Michelle, you live where it's primarily 80 degrees on a daily basis. When are you going to wear this jacket? And then I thought about it, and I was like, is it worth? So
Definitely a very environmental shift. Like, I think this whole thing that we're talking about is just lots of change, growth, and adaptability. And in order to experience these things, not necessarily you have to move, but you need to come out of your comfort zone and get into something that would make you feel a little like a slight annoying itch that's kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that.
exactly,
And I think those little things add up to your personal growth. In this
for
case, something
sure.
as big as moving, or something as small as maybe I should, I don't know, pick up a new hobby, do
Mhm.
something different, change your everyday, like day to day things.
It doesn't matter where you go, it's always going to be hard to start fresh somewhere else.
For sure.
It's always different. It's always difficult. Um I always think about moving outside of the country. I always think about like,
Never ever thought about it once. I'm so, my head just sees like the United States map. Obviously, I know there's other things out there, but besides the islands, I don't think I've been out of the country like
yeah,
that. Are- Keep it in mind, it's not a small change, it's a big change from state to state. But for someone who is considering to live in a different country, this is like your stepping stone. And one day maybe you will go travel and live there for a little bit and see what it's like.
yeah,
But for somebody who hasn't done it, it's a little bit more of baby steps, a little bit scarier.
yeah.
So
I
it
believe
was
in
really
you. I
interesting
know
to,
you
I
can do it.
honestly, even though I obviously know about your life, but when I heard it, it was different to hear it because I'm like, wow, there's so many things I never really considered.
Yeah. It's really different. And I am going to, wrap this up by saying do it. Like if you ever think twice about making a change, moving out of state, moving out of the city, doesn't even have to be the same state. Move out of the city, the neighborhood that you grew up in, something like that. You want to experience something else and you're afraid. My one thing to say to you is do it. Do not be afraid. There's always going to be fears no matter what you do in your life. But when you prevail, when you flourish, you're going to look back at yourself and be like, I did that. And then you're not going to be afraid to do it again. And then you're going to be motivating other people to do it too. So,
Spoken very wisely. I like that. I do. Thank you guys so much for listening and hopping in here. We hope that you got a little taste of New York life, South Florida life, and just a little bit more about us and our thoughts.
mm-hmm.
So, thank you so much, guys, for listening. We really appreciate you guys, and tune in next time for TMI.
Bye.